We are good to go.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to the April 12th, 2022 Missoula Parks and Recreation Board meeting. My name is John O'Connor. I'll be chairing the meeting in Dale's absence. For those folks who are calling in, please remember that you will press *9 to raise your hand and be recognized by Cassie. And then you will also press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. That can be kind of tricky, but just remember those things. And so we'll start out with a roll call. Cassie, please.
Okay. John?
Here.
Wendy?
Here, sorry.
That's okay. Margie?
Here.
Aaron?
Here.
Dale? Is absent. Sonia? She's absent. And Danny is also absent. So we have a quorum.
Thank you, Cassie. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. If we could have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thanks, Margie. Is there a second?
This is Wendy with a second.
Any comments or corrections? Cassie, I have one under item 2.4. At the end, before we did the motion, the board did consider whether to postpone or proceed. And the pleasure of the board was to proceed. And that's not reflected in there. I think it's important to note that because it was requested by the public and we did discuss whether to postpone or proceed.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to mute my phone, sorry. Sorry about that. Next, we have any general announcements under item 1.3.
Did you want to vote on the minutes, John?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I do.
That's okay.
All those in favor of approving the minutes with the correction, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks for the reminder.
Okay.
Item 1.3, any public announcements?
Jeff has his hand up. I'm going to go ahead and allow him to talk.
Great. Jeff,
Hello, can you hear me?
You're open mic now.
Good.
We're doing announcements, so if you're wanting to do a public comment instead, we can wait for that, but otherwise proceed.
Well, this is a public comment, but it's not on an agenda item.
Okay. I don't see any other announcements, so let's go ahead with item 1.4. Jeff, please go ahead.
Okay,
You have the floor.
thanks, John. I think it was probably 2 years ago, just prior to COVID hitting, I came before the Parks Board with a couple of my colleagues, Tom Facey and Sylvia, and we've been working on developing a plaque for Rass Park. In 1971, the Parks Board dedicated what was then Island Park to become Rass Park. But there really is no way of memorializing who James K. Rass, for whom the park was named. His story is not there in the park. And so we've been working on developing a plaque. We've been in communication with the family on getting the text just right. We're at a point now where we've been working with Fred Pico of Creative Castings in Lewistown on the design and fabrication of the plaque. The mayor has agreed to declare August 24th as Jim Rass Day in Missoula. And the Downtown Association has agreed to let us be part of the Out to Lunch program on August 24th. We have talked with Donna over the years about placement of the plaque, and where we generally settled on is the northeast corner of the park near the bottom of the stairs. Specifically, we don't have a spot yet. We would hope that the Parks Department staff could help us locate that. We're proposing to place the plaque in that location in a steel framework that we will view as temporary. We know that Caras Park is undergoing probably for the next 10 or 15 years some major renovations, including renovations to the entrance at the end of Ryman. And at that time, when those renovations are made, it seems to us that that would be a good place to put the plaque in a permanent location. We're hoping that the Parks Board will participate with us in this, and we've kind of had in mind that on the 24th we could do a rededication of Caras Park to Jim Caras. It doesn't require any hoops to jump through, since it's not going to change anything, not going to change the name or anything else, but it might be a nice way to commemorate the installation of this plaque. Furthermore, as I said, since Caras Park is going to undergo all these improvements over the next 10 or 15 years, I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of public requests for, well, there's going to be requests for private funding to help with that. We're going to do a lot of fundraising to see that those improvements get made. And this would be a good event to kind of start the next real public awareness of the new future of Caras Park and the riverfront trails that came in the Northside Riverfront Parks and Trails plan that was adopted last year, late last fall. So I think that this is an opportune time for us to heighten public awareness about Caras Park, heighten public awareness about the improvements that are coming, heighten public awareness about the plans that we worked so hard and so successfully over the last few years to develop. And I'm hoping that, like I said, that the Parks Board will see its way clear to adopt a resolution or whatever your practice is to designate that 24th of August as the rededication of Caras Park. So that's my pitch, that's my information, that's what I have to share with you, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff? Donna?
I wanted to thank Jeff for his work, and for Park Board, all installations, interpretive signs come to you for approval. So Jeff, after this meeting, I will get with you to get you on the Park Board formally so that they can formally consider what you want to do, just so that we don't have a lot of resources expended before you get full Park Board approval. You were before the board, gosh, at least 2, maybe more than 2 years ago, got the general nod to a Caras Park name and acknowledgement, but now it's the formal process. The other thing about the site is, because we're in the midst of construction, it's very difficult to place signage or interpretation. And just so the board knows, we will be partnering with the Missoula Downtown Association to complete a heritage and interpretation plan for Caras, East Caras, and Bess Reed. You may or may not be shocked at how many requests we get for some sort of art, sign, interpretation, or memorial in Caras, Bonner, and Rose Parks. And so those are parks where we, in across the system, very thoughtful about how we do that, because you want it to be cohesive in the signage, the language, the fonts, the colors, so the park feels like it all belongs in the park, and that we didn't all go out shopping for furniture on separate days without talking to each other.
Thanks, Donna. Cassie, would it be appropriate to add this item as a future item for next agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other public or guest comments right now before moving on to our Dig Missoula presentation?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
There's no other comment.
Thanks. I have to say, I'm always amazed that Missoula is full of people who step up for great causes and put their hearts into things. So it's nice to see what's going on with Jeff and his group. Okay, so item 1.41, Dig Missoula Partner in Parks Highlight Program. Shirley, Paul, and Sarah, you are on deck. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, John. So several years ago, if you recall, Dig Missoula and Parks and Recreation got together and brought a ENT request to purchase sand to upgrade one of the courts there at Playfair Park. And in the midst of doing that, it kicked off a great partnership. And Paul Stanton is here to elaborate on what they've accomplished over the last several years. And I'll just turn it over to him.
Okay, so Paul, we can't hear you. This is Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm going to fill in while hopefully Paul gets his microphone working. Thank you for this time today. We are Dig Missoula. Our mission is to build community through volleyball. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization with a primary goal of, as I said, building community and growing that community through the sport of volleyball. The 501c3 was established in 2017, but we've been around a little longer than that, working on community outreach. Specifically started with the Volleyball Open, which is the big grass tournament in the summer, and then went to volleyball scholarships and youth clinics. And as Shirley said, we've been partnering with Missoula Parks and Rec on our sand facility. So we're continuing to grow with more sand tournaments and leagues. As part of our improvements to Playfair Park, our goal, what we've been envisioning, is to create Montana's state-of-the-art volleyball sand court facility. And with Missoula Parks and Recreation's help, we've been able to replace courts. We've gone through with one court in 2019. We moved on to a second court in 2020. And as you may know, there are 4 courts, and now all of those courts have new sand as of 2021. The process to do that was quite extensive. It included removing the old sand and rocks and scraping the dirt beds pretty clean and adding and raking that new sand. There was an extensive fundraiser where businesses and communities donated towards the cost of about $25,000 to get those deliveries of sand put together. And since then, Dig Missoula has replaced and donated the nets to Missoula Parks and Rec. And we've been able to add net adjustment hardware, which makes it where those nets can go from women's heights nets to men's heights nets. And that gives us some really nice flexibility, particularly with the youth clinics. The nickname MSO Beach harkens back to the original location of the airport. And so that's where that comes from. We have more continuing good work to do. Again, with the helps of Parks and Rec, we'll be working on doing a sprinkler redirect. Right now, about 70% of our sand courts get hit with quite a bit of water. And as you can see on that particular light pole there, where the number 1 is, kind of as an indication of how much water is getting sprayed. So we're working on that. It's definitely a maintenance priority for us to keep those nets in good shape that are there, and also to keep the sand from getting too compacted. Then we'll be adding more sand because that's an ongoing need to keep the sand supple. And we are working on getting antenna and pole pads, kind of bumper pads for that hardware to keep people safe out there. And then in long term, we're hoping to do some replacement lighting. Again, as indicated with the number 4 there, there's a lot of lights that historically have been there, but right now they're not operational. So someday we hope to get those up and running again. Dig Missoula does a lot with youth development and scholarships. We have annual volleyball scholarships where we partnered with clubs in Missoula and in the Bitterroot indoor clubs, where we provide opportunities for those youth to continue to play. And we're hoping to foster the love of the game. Our high school scholarships were started in 2018, and then we've added middle school scholarships since then. Our youth volleyball clinics are very fun. We have outdoor at MSO Beach, and then indoor clinics. At least now that COVID's over, we'll start those back up again. The big event is the Dig Missoula Volleyball Open. It's out at Fort Missoula Recreational Park in Missoula. It's 4-on-4 grass volleyball tournament with a lot of different levels and divisions, opportunities for players to get out there and play. we attract teams and players from all over the Intermountain Northwest region, from Seattle to Boise. The first tournament was in 2017, and it's been growing every year. In 2021, we were up to 400 athletes, and we expect to be higher than that this year. So this year, we've got a lot of specific events we just wanted to share with you briefly. The big volleyball tournament will be on July 9th, and then we have many sand events coming up as well. So brand new, this is not in your agenda because we just added it. We will be having a Dig Community Day at MSO Beach on April 24th. So please come out. You're all invited to come out and join us. We'll have some music and some hot dogs and chips, and we'll be setting up grass nets so people can play grass, as well as sand nets for everyone to take part. So that is all our official presentation. I do have some more photos I can share with you. If you have any questions for us, we'd love to entertain those.
I think my microphone might be working now.
Yay, why didn't you jump in?
How convenient, right, when the
Rocking,
presentation
Sarah.
ends.
Does anybody have any questions for us as we go through these kind of a general slideshow, if you will?
I have a quick question just from staff response, Donna or Morgan. Great presentation, by the way. In terms of the sprinkler system, where do we stand with that and addressing concerns, or where is that on the work list?
We have, last year, we were trying to procure bids to do a sprinkler redirect. And we
That question might have been directed to Shirley, I think.
Yeah. Well, but we've
okay.
done some research there and tried to dialogue with Shirley on that. But we've received a bid or two, both of which I think it's due to COVID and understaffing. They pretty much dropped out of the process. And we're trying to find creative ways, maybe with Shirley and Parks and Rec to come up with some solutions there. I don't know if Shirley wants to comment.
So one of the challenges, when I first heard that we needed to redirect the sprinkler system, I thought, oh, how simple. Well, nothing can be simple. And with Lincoln working on this, who is an absolute expert in the field of irrigation, it's not a simple fix. And so we really need to contract it out. And so we're going to continue working with Paul and Dig and see if we can't find a contractor to do that work.
Yeah, it's proven to be difficult. And I think, again, back to that, understaffing due to the current environment with, COVID and all of the, it's just proving to be a longer project than we had liked. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Shirley. I mean, in my simpleton mind, I'm like, hey, why don't you just put up some kind of barrier along the edge there, so when the water hits, it's deflected back. Then I think, okay, that's flooding. Then it's going to cause somewhere else, and I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to that anyway.
Lincoln, did you have your hand up for us?
Yeah, and thanks, Paul, for meeting with me last fall. I know we kind of ran out of time to get more contractors in there to get some numbers since we winterized the sprinkler system. I can definitely get back with you this spring. Here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be firing that back up and hopefully get a couple more contractors out there to get a few more numbers. And like it was already mentioned, it is a little more complex than you would think to redesign the sprinklers around the court there, but I think it would be a great idea and we can work together on that.
Thanks, Lincoln.
Thanks, Lincoln. Are there any other questions or comments for Sarah or Paul?
Donna?
John, I just wanted to, on behalf of our entire department, thank Dig, Missoula. They've been outstanding partners. And one of the things I really appreciate about the organization is how much they give back to community in every way you can imagine through volleyball. Pretty cool. So thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Do we have any callers from the public? Cassie, any requests for comment from the public?
No public comment.
Great, thank you. With that, we will move on to our action items. Item 2.1, the Fort Missoula Regional Park and Playfair Park Tennis Capital Campaign with Donna and Andrea.
Thank you. I wanted to introduce, we have Andrea. We have the Garden City Tennis Association here, and also USTA Montana, represented by Andrea Johnson. We also have David Herrera and Laura Randall, and maybe Steve Fletcher. I haven't met Steve in person yet, all here before you. So a little bit of background. What we're asking the park board to do today is review a capital campaign approach to replacing both the 12 courts at Playfair Park and the 8 courts at Fort Missoula Regional Park. During the last fiscal year budget, so during fiscal year 22, City Council agreed to set aside $1.3 million, which is our estimated amount to cover 50% of the replacement costs of all 20 courts. In our ideal world, we would be able to do this in post-tension concrete because of the how long it lasts, but it also costs a lot more. So our fallback is if we aren't able to get all the way to the finish line, we may have a mix of asphalt and post-tension concrete courts. We're approaching this project in pretty quickly. We hope to actually bid the Playfair courts here in the next couple of weeks. And so it is likely that those 12 courts will remain asphalt. We've been meeting over the past year as a tennis community. We have multiple partners. These are the only competitive sport courts other than the University of Montana and the Peak Athletic Club courts, fitness center courts. And the bank of 12 is very critical. Bank of 12 plus the 8, if you will, auxiliary complex are really critical to competitive tennis. We have 3 high schools from Missoula County Public Schools playing on these courts, as well as Loyola and Valley Christian, as well as all of our own programs, Open Play and Garden City Tennis programs. Tennis, and I'll let Andrea speak to this in greater detail, but both tennis and pickleball saw a huge revival and re-energization during the pandemic for a whole bunch of reasons. You can play outdoors at a distance, and it's pretty affordable. And so all you have to do is get a racket, and generally there's a public court nearby. So pretty exciting stuff. It's also a sport that can be played by individuals with disabilities, and it is a sport that's working very, very intentionally towards a greater level of inclusivity and representation of all populations. The presentation, and I'll share a document and then turn this over to Andrea and let her talk while we're going, is get a bid. Very, very challenging construction time period for a whole bunch of reasons. Cost of products related to tennis courts. It does include delivery of labor and materials. And so a lot of challenges there, but USTA and the National Recreation and Park Association have given us notice that they'll be announcing a significant funding project through a partnership with Game Time Play Corps. And so we're hoping that a big part of the fundraising through the capital campaign will happen through Andrea and her group and get Fort Missoula largely paid for using the city's 1.3 from Playfair as the leverage to complete all 20 courts. So I threw a lot of numbers at you, 2 places, lots of different approaches. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who's been leading the charge for us as our community member, and I will share some of the documents she has. Go ahead, Andrea.
Hello, everyone. It's great to meet you all. I guess we started this, I don't know, was it last spring? Garden City Tennis Association, myself as the executive director at USTA Montana, as well as some other people within the tennis community, just hoping to get a strong group and partnership together to kind of make this go. And it became especially important this past spring when we realized that we had 4.6 million new tennis players across the United States. People just wanted to get outside and play something that was safe and do something with their families and just get out of the house pretty much. Gyms were closed, everywhere was closed. There was just, nothing to do. So we discovered that people wanted to play tennis, and not only that, they wanted to play tennis in the parks. So it just makes sense, as the goal of USTA Montana is to grow tennis across the state, that we form a very strong partnership with parks. And this is the perfect time to do it. So as a result of the group meetings and discussions, we kind of came up with this capital campaign plan to help us fund the project. And as Donna mentioned earlier, we're looking at half and half, basically. So 50% City of Missoula investment, and then 50% from our capital campaign plan. So you can see how that's divided up here at the bottom, with our sponsorships, corporate donors, individual donors, and hopefully the grant from the USTA itself, the national governing body. And this all, let's see, yep, our donor recognition chart. Still always a work in progress. But this is what we're looking at as far as the amounts of gifts and how we hope to recognize the donors.
So just to follow up for Park Board, and especially for some of our newer members, the Parks and Recreation Board has an adopted policy around naming parks, recreation facilities, open space, and trails. There are a number of reasons, and we recently went through that naming document when we identified the ice rink at Pineview Park as the Bill Beavis rink. One of the components of that that the Park Board established years ago is that our partners could engage in capital campaign efforts, raising private funds through grants, foundations, direct donations, in-kind services, and that the Park Board, through the naming document, would establish a way for recognition on site. Really successful examples of capital campaigns in recent years: the Grand Creek Trail in partnership with Karen Sippy as a member of the GCTA. Another one is Silver Summit Playground, Mobash Skate Park, the bike parks at Bellevue with Friends of Missoula Parks, and the friends and family of
Tanner
Olson. Thank you. I was trying to think of his first name, Tanner Olson, and several others. And then what we have in another very recent one, Fort Missoula Regional Park and the VIP, very important partners, wall of recognition. And so what we're entertaining here is the potential to name an entire complex. So it doesn't rename Playfair Park or Fort Missoula Regional Park, but it could rename a complex depending on the gift. It could rename a bank of 4 courts, or it could rename a court, or it could be a kiosk at the entrance to one of the complexes that describes how all the donations came to be, and a recognition just at one site. And that's what you see at Silver Summit and Mobash in particular, is where there's a tier of giving. And been working with Andrea, lots of options around drawing the courts on a wall and stuff like that. But the good news for Park Board is, as Garden City Tennis Association takes the lead on this capital campaign, and once we have donors, they come back to you with the design, exact specific location for installation, what the names are. You did this with Mobash Skate Park, and just to give you a little bit of background, they actually did sell pavers because it worked really well in incorporating into an actual element at the skate park. And you actually accepted all of the inscriptions on the pavers, except I think 2, after doing a bit of research, because of your interest in honoring inclusivity and political correctness and respectfulness, and they simply changed those. So very seldom do you make changes to these, but there are times, and your review is incredibly important as far as what we put in parks. And I'll leave it at that and let the board have their discussion and questions of Andrea and myself.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Andrea.
Mhm.
Does the board have any clarifying questions? Donna, I've got a quick question on the 1.3 that's coming from the city side. That's a park district fund. Is that correct? Is that money already in hand?
It is, it's approved through the budget, and once we get bids, then we will, in essence, borrow money against the park district and future taxes paid. It's a lease program that the city uses. It's how we, the city does a number of major infrastructure improvements, and it just makes sense because these are generational improvements, so that
Yeah.
people who use those new improvements help pay for them as over time.
So it will, so just so I clarify, the money, the full 1.3 isn't necessarily there now, but it can be, we can use the program to borrow against for the future. And then since the bidding process is already starting, would the plan be to move forward with the total project prior to the capital campaign reaching its goal, or would it be on hold until the capital campaign side raised the 1.3?
We have, we're going to kick off the capital campaign as soon as we get approval here. Bidding will take us about 6 weeks. Construction would not happen until fall at best. And so we do want to continue because of the 12 courts at Playfair, 3 are already unplayable. And we may have 1 or 2 headed that way very quickly, 1 or 2 additional. And so in our partnership with GCTA and the schools, they've made a commitment to continue fundraising, and Fort Missoula will be on hold until we're able to raise funds there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
I just have a clarifying question. I'm between cement and asphalt. So is it based on what type of bids you get, which way you'll go, or?
Because of the pace that we needed to go and availability of funds now, we will go with asphalt courts. And we do use the standards and specifications established by the USTA and the Track and Court Builders Association. Our goal, though, we would have loved to have done post-tension concrete. It does cost almost twice as much. And so we are hoping to get there with the Fort Missoula courts because they also last at least twice as long. And so it's a great payback, and you do not have the cracks, and it's simpler than just concrete. Just so everybody knows, it's post-tension concrete. So in essence, it's a giant floating slab with tension created by metal infrastructure that the concrete is poured over. We also think there's a potential for a partnership with pickleball because we do have some private funding for pickleball at Fort Missoula. And so in USTA and the Pickleball Association are working very closely together on a national level. So that's good for all of us too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Margie. Any other questions for Donna or Andrea? And Donna, just for the public, anybody on the public record, would you just clarify that, at Fort Missoula, the additional courts we put in were the pickleball courts, and we rehabbed the existing courts? Is that correct? And that's why they still are part of this project and have extended their life expectancies over?
That's exactly correct. With the 2014 Parks and Trails bond, it was for development of Fort Missoula. And if you go back to all of the original documents, the tennis courts are actually outside of the boundary of the improvements. What we did is we did bring in some additional funds, and we repaired cracks and resurfaced those courts. The pickleball courts were brand new. They were identified from the beginning as part of that project. It would have just been premature. When you put this much money into infrastructure, you replace it when it needs replacing. You don't replace it ahead of time. Sure. And we were in a place where we could do cyclical maintenance. we feel that by the time we get the capital campaign complete here, we'll be ready for Fort Missoula, so we won't experience what we're experiencing at Playfair, failure before fixing.
Yeah, thank you. And Andrea, is your group feeling pretty confident about your ability to raise the funds during the capital campaign?
Yes, we certainly recognize the challenge it's going to be, but I think we have a good solid group that's committed to the effort.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions for Andrea or Donna? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion if somebody would like to make a motion.
I will make a motion that we approve the capital campaign plan for raising funds for replacement of tennis courts at Fort Missoula Regional Park and Playfair Park has provided in this meeting.
Thank you, Margie. Is there a second?
This is Erin. I second the motion.
Thanks, Aaron. Any discussion amongst members of the board? Hearing none, we're ready for a vote then. We can just do a voice vote if that's okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
You very
you.
much, Andrea. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Before moving on to the next item, I noted when looking at the documents that were attached for the Fort Missoula that we haven't updated our naming policy since 2011. Donna, do you feel that there's any need to add that as a future item to just look at it, make sure it still aligns with everything, or would it be something that be perhaps considered as part of our strategic plan?
I think it would be a great discussion for strategic planning, but it is actually one of the documents that this board created that I probably use the most. And so it seems to have been working. I can't think of a time where it failed us. And now we've just used it twice again in the last 2 months, and it seems to work for the purposes intended. More than happy to review any policy though.
Unless somebody else feels that we need to, then I think it sounds like it's working. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our presentations and discussions and updates. First item is 3.1, the ecosystem services update with Morgan, Ben, Marie, Karen, and Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Glad to have some time on the agenda. I know it's been tough doing these updates. We've been pretty slammed. If you recall, we've had to bump the urban forest update and the CL update. And so we've decided to combine them into one update and give you just the full meal deal today. And so I've got several guests here today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves as we get into the presentation, just in the consideration of time. My name is Morgan Valiant. I'm the Ecosystem Services Superintendent. For those of you that don't know me, I have spent the last dozen years, or spent about a dozen years as the Conservation Lands Manager. And then in 2020, we created the new Ecosystem Services Division by combining urban forestry and conservation lands under the same division. And so I'm overseeing both of those programs now. And I can say 2022 is really off to a great start. We have had a bunch of vacancies in staffing. We are now fully staffed. I've been really impressed by the team dynamics and the projects that are coming up. I can say we've really got a bunch of great people with great ideas that are really looking forward, are developing solutions and new innovative projects to move, not just the ecosystem services or the parks department, but actually the entire city forward. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go over everything we're doing, but we are going to provide a snapshot of generally where we left last season, and then kind of some of our priorities for this next season. And I've got Jeff running the slides for us, so let's go ahead and hit the next slide, Jeff. So to give you an idea of our organization within the Ecosystem Services Division, we have, and I don't know if you want to follow along with your cursor there, Jeff. I keep trying to do it, but I realize it's not my screen. There I am. On the left side, you see the structure of the Conservation Lands Program with Jeff Gickelhorn as manager. You'll hear from him in a bit. And we have kind of two different efforts in conservation land. One is our program support side of things, and that's Clancy Gendro as our program specialist with our research and monitoring coordinator. And then we've got our maintenance side. And that is really split now into two functional work teams, both recreation management and natural resource management. Of course, all of conservation lands, a lot of the work we do, and certainly the large plans, the plans that we developed are vetted through our Conservation Lands Committee, which is a committee of this board. And it provides kind of that sounding board, both to our staff within the Conservation Lands Program, and then also to you all when it's time to make decisions on how we manage these lands. If we move to the right side of the chart, we've got the Urban Forestry Program. We've got our kind of recently hired, I guess he has gotten through his probationary period, so it's been almost 6 months now. It goes really quick. Our urban forester, Ben Carson, he will introduce himself when he gets going. Marie Anderson, our urban forest specialist, you all know her. She's going to talk a bit about some of the programs she's been developing within the UF. And then we've got our maintenance side, which consists of our arborists. They are all 12 months now that do a lot of our work in the field. We've got some pictures of them doing work out there as well. The other unique thing that is really just a great relationship that helps us tremendously as we try to advocate for the urban forest and make progress is our Trees for Missoula advocacy group. And they are a nonprofit headed by Karen Sippy, who's also here and is going to say a few words to you. And this really does help tremendously. I think everything we do within Parks and Rec really touches so many citizens in the Valley. Urban forestry is unique in that, I mean, we are managing the entire urban forest. And so not every house has a tree in front of it yet. We will be changing that, but most houses do have trees in front of them. And so urban forestry really does have a high level of direct service to individual residents where they live, not so much where they visit when they come to our parks or our open spaces. And so having Karen there and the entire Trees for Missoula group really does help further our mission and further that outreach. And we've got a lot of great things working in urban forestry. Let's hit the next slide. So you've seen this slide before, some of you, but what are ecosystem services? This division, and I'm not going to say that we're the only division supplying ecosystem services. That's not true at all. Ecosystem services are really a lens that I think a lot of our management can proceed through. And so your ecosystem, whether that's a built ecosystem or a natural ecosystem, supplies these different services that really do affect us as a community and our overall human well-being. There's those regulating services. So when we talk about stormwater capture, floodwater retention, urban cooling from our urban forest, clean water, those are a lot of our regulating services. Then we also have our provisioning services, which do include our clean water, our timber, the animals on the landscape, our minerals, the stuff that we harvest off the landscape. And then we've also got our cultural services. And so this really does supply that either tourism or recreational aspects. And of course, that is something that as a department, we do broadly across all of our programs and divisions, certainly. And so all of these really do lead to us being happy in the long run. And so within conservation or within our ecosystem services division, our conservation lands really serve that role of providing those habitats in our wildland urban interface, really buffering and collecting a lot of our stormwater inputs and floodwater attenuation. And then it certainly also provides us with unique recreational experiences. And certainly, you know, as you'll hear about from our urban wood waste, zero wood waste program, we also do use products off those landscapes as well. We don't really have a lot of hard data from conservation lands as far as exactly what ecosystem services conservation lands program is providing, but that is something we're working on, and we are going to start including in some of our annual reports. And when Jeff talks, he'll talk a bit about what we did last year. And one thing that is unique that you guys might already know, and I know you'll mention as well, is that for the first time since the creation of the Conservation Lands Program, we actually came out with a full annual report. And so very detailed description of what was done last season. And that is something that's gonna be repeated each year. And we are gonna start working in some of these this data about what these ecosystem services that these landscapes provide us. We hit the next slide, please. Within urban forestry, these ecosystem services are actually a lot easier to track. This is not something that is new. This is something that is becoming the industry standard across urban forests and forestry in general. And so one of the great things that we can provide, this is a graphic that I absolutely love. I just get giddy every time Marie crunches the numbers and provides us with this graph. This is direct data from our tree inventory. And so annually, our urban forest, and this is not our entire urban forest because we've not finished that inventory yet. I think we're still hovering right around 40,000 trees. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong when it's your turn to talk, but we're still plugging away. But of the urban forest that we've inventoried, we're recognizing over $3 million per year in total benefits. And so that includes increases in property values, 32 million gallons of stormwater absorption, certainly carbon sequestration, certainly energy savings as that tree in front of your house cools your house during the heat of the summer and you don't have to use as much electricity or air conditioning, and then air quality. Another thing from our inventory, this is not part of our ecosystem services, but we do have an ever evolving list of what types of trees are in our urban forest. And you guys preaching a little bit to the choir, you've heard this before, it's not going to come as a surprise, but the majority of our urban forest is in really rough shape. Not only are we not able to hit our maintenance goals, so we do experience quite a bit of failure and liability risk, but we also have the majority of our urban forest just in a few primary trees. And the big one is Norway maple at 22%. If you think about the recent experience we just had with a global pandemic, if you put one person in a room with a whole bunch of other people real tight, that disease is going to spread really thick or really quickly. And when we have a really an urban forest that's comprised of largely one species of tree, it's much more prone to attack by disease or some kind of impact that could cause massive failure across our entire urban forest. And as you can see, this is something, and as you know, this is something we can't afford and is a big initiative that we're working on right now. And one of the biggest things we're doing not only is trying to increase diversity across our urban forests as we have opportunity, but really focused reforestation efforts. And the passage of the 2018 open space bond helped tremendously. And we're going to provide you with some information as far as how those dollars are being implemented to get trees in underserved areas to help expand the benefits of our urban forests. Next slide, please. So here I'm going to turn it over to Karen Sippy to talk a little bit about trees from Missoula. As always, thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I think we'll just keep rolling through this and then we can we'll certainly have some time for questions.
Hello, thank you, welcome. I didn't realize it was going this quickly. My name is Karen Sippy. I'm the volunteer executive director for Trees for Missoula. We are Missoula's urban forest volunteer and advocacy group since 2011. We also enjoy a charitable nonprofit status through our very generous fiscal sponsor, Friends of Missoula Parks. It has been mentioned here before. Just quickly, this is just a snapshot of what we did within the past year. And keep in mind, we've been doing this for 10 years now, going on 11 years. Proper tree care begins with planting, and through our partnership with our urban forestry division, who you're going to hear from, we are able to provide community members with the opportunity to learn the hows and whys of proper tree planting while getting their hands dirty and helping out the neighbors. We planted bare root trees at Fort Missoula Park last fall. I had a great fun. Speaking of neighbors, with Missoula Neighborhoods and the Urban Forestry Division, we began a directed planting campaign aimed at our neighborhoods with the most need for tree canopy. Last year, volunteers from the neighborhood and Trees for Missoula planted trees in North Side boulevards, where planting locations had been identified and neighbors chose the species they wanted. They agreed to provide water and care, and the North Side West Side Neighborhood Council Leadership Council, they paid for hoses to go to each one of those residents so that they actually had a hose to go to those trees to water them. So kudos to them. We're going to be doing it again in North Side this summer. And the Leadership Council agreed to provide hoses once again. Unbelievable. Trees for Missoula will also be back in a few years to help those neighbors with the formative pruning of those young boulevard trees. For the past 6 years, our city's certified arborists have been very generous with their time and have trained our volunteers, we call VIPs, volunteers in pruning. And we prune trees that have been in the ground for at least 3 years up to about 10 years to give them the proper structure. Pruning trees at this age and this stage helps prevent structural defects that can be dangerous and very costly for Ben's program that he's going to talk about when they mature. This past year, we began a homeowner pruning course with great response, and we continue to plan more classes more frequently in the coming years. We also get to celebrate trees. We sponsor and support Run for the Trees, Missoula's annual urban forest awareness event. And it happens to be on April 23rd. You can still sign up to run if you want to or volunteer. We get to spread cheer while working with kiddos from ages 8 to 80. And if you look at that bottom left-hand picture, yes, that's me. I am Sprig Squirrel, tree lover and intrepid reporter, and got to do a video for the Lowell Elementary kiddos. We planted a tree with the 5th graders last year for Arbor Day. They got to create, the whole elementary school got to create that amazing mural that's in the middle there. Those are all clay hands that are leaves that each kiddo got to glaze, and Clay Studio fired them up for them. This year, we're going to be working with Paxton Elementary 5th graders who did a fundraiser for Trees for Missoula and raised $295 for us for this year. So cool. So up to from 8 to 80, we went on a beautiful tour on the perfect fall day with Missoula Movers in the right bottom hand corner here. Adam Coe, one of our city's certified arborists, took us on a great walk from Bonner Park through the state of Montana Arboretum and back. And we just get to reach so many people. It's great fun. Finally, I'd like to talk about the Parks Zero Waste Program, which you're also going to hear about a little bit from other people here, which started when Trees for Missoula began milling trees removed from our urban forest for shade shelters. And we've had 2 that have been fabricated from that lumber so far, one on the Bitterroot Trail and one in the Bellevue Bike Skills Park. Last year, we facilitated a project using this reclaimed urban forest lumber with the University of Montana Sculpture 2 class. These students designed, fabricated, and installed a functional sculpture, a lovely place to rest your bones and take in the gorgeous views along the Bitterroot Trail. We look forward to continuing to plant and prune and educate and advocate for our urban forestry division and for our trees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Hey, Morgan, before you guys go on, I just want to give Karen a shout out. I've known her for a long time now. I don't think I've ever met a person who's more energetic and committed to a project than Karen. And I remember when we first started talking about developing some type of group, our first name, I think, was FUF, Friends of the Urban Forest. FUF, Trees for Missoula sounds a lot better. And what she's been able to do in terms of not only educating herself about trees, but the general public and getting people excited about and understanding the urban forest, I think is just monumental for a volunteer, citizen volunteer. So thank you, Karen, for all the work that you do for us.
Thank you so much, John. Very kind.
We're going to turn it over to Marie Bogus now to talk about grants and development.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. I always hate going after you. So we did have quite a bit of Arbor Day grants this last year. Karen briefly mentioned the Spark Arts and planting at Westside Park. That's that first graphic there. We were also awarded 2 program development grants, one in 2021 and then another one this year. Both of those are basically creating information packets and videos to discuss the need for urban forest management practices and what that is. And this is geared toward the entire state of Montana, not just Missoula. And it also ties in best management practices through wildlife urban interfaces into urban areas. So it's kind of an overreaching education piece. We were also awarded an innovation grant from the DNRC this year, which was pretty incredible because this is a no match grant. So we have $10,000 provided by the DNRC to create a website template that will allow ease of access, not only for citizens who need to maybe look at our inventory and file an online form for debris removal or a request for inspection on a tree, or also just to look at the tree and see what they have in their front yard, which is pretty important for our education and outreach part of our programming. But it also will allow contractors and other staff within the city to be able to go on our website and actually look up exactly where trees are in relation to possible projects. And it'll give them very good links to information, our design manual, our approved street tree list, which we'll also be editing and updating this year. And so it's just going to be a really good clearinghouse of information that's very concise and easy to navigate for everyone. And then another huge chunk of our bar graph here is the SEPHR grant, which is a federal grant we co-authored with the DNRC, and it includes Missoula, Helena, and Kalispell. Our 3 cities are going to partner and try to do some pretty amazing things. I know you all have heard pieces and parts of this over different projects, but we are going to be installing a new ball and burlap nursery that's already started out at the Poplar Farm. It also includes equipment purchasing for that nursery, includes tripling the size of our gravel bed nurseries, so for our bare root tree orders. And then it also provides funding for a seasonal staff member who can do social media and education and outreach for all of these projects across all of the cities. So it's a pretty unique grant opportunity that we haven't had a chance to do something like this in the past, and also partner with our local cities. So that was pretty cool. And so all of this is going to be going against, not going against, but being matched with the open space bond. And so these are direct dollars, matching dollars for that bond. So that's it's a pretty unique situation that we found ourselves in this last year compared to our one grant of just about $24,000 or $2,400 last year. So we kind of set the bar a little higher this year for ourselves. Jeff, can you go to the next slide, please? So the other responsibility that I have besides trying to procure grant money is development. and ensuring not only that when we are looking at boulevard landscaping plans from a subdivision down to a single build, that all of our standards and our design manual are being met. So this all goes back to that first graphic that Morgan showed. All of those I-tree calculations, all of that data is being increased every day because of our development that's happening here in the Missoula Valley. So we're responsible from the beginning of the process at subdivision review in the very conceptual designs all the way through to the final build for each individual house in these subdivisions. So we're in this process through the whole thing, ensuring that green infrastructure is being included in all of it. We're also doing a lot of field work and doing a lot of inspections on all of these for each one of the certificates of occupancy. Last year alone, I did 600 inspections for individual certificate of occupancies just for residential housing. We had another 150 just for commercial properties. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty significant chunk of time to ensure that all of those trees are being installed properly. And then what we do from there is after we have 2 growing seasons, those trees are then added to the inventory. And the reason we do that, the reason we wait for 2 full seasons is to ensure that those trees have established and have gotten past their warranty period with the contractor that installed them. And all of this is all tied back to building permit side. So this has been a pretty robust program that we've instituted over the last couple of years. And the work that we've been able to do in the between departments has been pretty phenomenal. And the fact that now Parks and Recreation is fully part of the planning process is just leaps and bounds beyond where we were in the past. So that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Marie. I'm going to take over from here. Well, thanks for the part of the presentation and thanks for all that you do. I'm glad that you're dealing with all the contractors and the C of Os because it's not that glamorous, but man, is it important to ensure that our trees are established appropriately. So I've been asked by Morgan to introduce myself to pretty much everyone but John because I've known, well, John's been around since, as you can see on the slide, I was here previously, and I will stand by FUF. That was my idea in 2011. I like Friends of the Urban Forest, but Trees from Missoula does have a nice ring to it. Anyway, so how did I get to the position that I'm in now? Got a bachelor's in science in silvicultural forestry, moved subsequently to Chicago after my degree. There's no forests there. I became a tech for a private arborist company, a subsidiary of Davie Resource Group, and then became a plant healthcare representative before moving on and getting into municipal forestry starting out in 2005 for the city of Raleigh. The South is not for me. So I was only there for a year, moved back to my home area and became village forester for the village of Wilmette, Illinois, which is a very affluent northern suburb of the Chicago, and allowed for a lot of opportunity for me to learn what an ideal forestry program looks like, being that they had effectively unlimited funding and we're on a 5 to 7 year program, pruning every tree in the city. And it was kind of a learning experience. But my wife is from Troy, Montana. She wanted to live back in Montana. So in 2009, I got a job here with the city. Had some growing pains during that time period and was offered an opportunity to expand my my skill set by moving on to the University of Montana in 2011. Spent 10 years there learning about not only managing trees in the state of Montana's Arboretum, but also everything else green on campus. Learned a lot about infrastructure, learned about a lot about irrigation systems, and was also integral in the snow removal process there, which I'm hoping to help out with coming back. And I've been back here since September of last year, as Morgan stated, just over, well, almost 7 months. It'll be 7 months tomorrow, I think. I've been an ISA certified arborist for 17 years. And since coming out with the city, I've gotten my tree risk assessment qualification and my municipal specialist accreditation. There we go. So what is the, I've been kind of dealing with the field work side of things as I am integrating back into the division, which is very exciting, by the way, being that we are now a collaborative effort. It's always been collaborative, but now that it's housed under one division, ecosystem services, the prospect of working in wild urban interfaces is something that really brought me back into this. But so what is the crew and my responsibility primarily? That would be ensuring that we respond to residents timely. Generally, I try and get back to people within a day or two. Obviously, we can't do that quick of a turnaround on work, but it's basically pruning, removal, hazard mitigation, everything that you can think of with regard to managing an already established tree in either a boulevard, park, or other city right-of-way. We also do planting in boulevards and parks, and then do the post-planting tree care along with Trees for Missoula volunteers. That's not all, though. With an increased incidence of extreme weather events, we had one yesterday. We've had 2 since I've come on, so 2 in 7 months. That's significant. 4 a year is significantly more than it was just a decade ago, where we were only having 1 or 2 a year. This is a picture in Bonner Park that blue spruce uprooted and narrowly missed the bandshell, but completely destroyed a really nice linden adjacent to it. So the crew has quite a bit of responsibility in these events and storm response and cleanup. Part of our day-to-day operation is risk mitigation and hazard abatement, applying that tree risk assessment qualification. Make sure that our inventory is updated on a regular basis so that the numbers that Morgan presented to you earlier, technically they're a month old now, but I didn't update them this morning for this presentation, so they're from March. But they're very, very close to being representative because those are updated in real time as we remove, replace, and maintain trees. And then the crew also has quite a few collaborative projects with conservation lands going on in Bancroft Ponds, Greeno Park, various shared use spaces. That's not all that they do. Many people throughout the city don't know that all the urban forestry staff, they are 12 months. So that means that they are all tasked with doing snow removal during the winter, and they are not doing tree work. When they're doing snow removal, I'm doing quality control on snow removal. So we had something like 24 snow response days this winter, and the crew does a really, really good job of maintaining the trail system and in a lot of the areas downtown. We've also have the precedent and the honor of installing and removing all the Christmas decorations downtown. I think that originally started because we were the only operation in town with a bucket truck, and it has since been a way for us to continue to foster a good working relationship with all the downtown associations. As mentioned by Marie in her grant portion, we are in the middle of developing a ball and burlap tree nursery, which is approximately 2.5 acres out at the Poplar Farm. That's a picture of the crew this past fall, burning some of our root piles. They removed 2.5 acres of poplar trees, cleared the land, removed the root masses. It has since been turned by the city street department and should be ready for planting this spring if we can get some infrastructure installed. The picture below that is Dave Duran, who's a local miller and general lover of wood, milling some wood for us last fall. Dave did about 2 weeks of milling, and we got, I don't even know how many thousands of board feet of urban timber that is all going back into either conservation lands projects or amenities within developed parks, like picnic benches, garbage can enclosures, signage, all sorts of different uses. And then we do a significant amount of coordination with other departments, wastewater, streets, engineering, etc. Not just in Marie's side, but also from an operational standpoint. So one of the projects that we did for it was actually a citywide project, but it was in coordination with wastewater, was we did a number of removals on Horseback Ridge to clear radio line of sight for police, EMS, as well as public works and engineering. So that was an interesting project for the guys. And then that's just a little picture of some of the wood that we had stored out at the new Fort Pond site that is currently in St. Ignatius, being kiln dried to be used. Potentially still some this season, but probably going into next shoulder season, they'll be making more park amenities out of those products. So what are our goals for this year? We're already like a third of the way through it, but we're working on these goals. We do have a massive backlog of customer service requests, and those are service requests that residents call in with concerns and or pruning or removals. We have a backlog of over 500 requests currently, and I did probably 15 to 20 inspections tomorrow. Those are really starting to pick up as buds are swelling and breaking. So we got to really concentrate on making a dent in that backlog. In talking with Dave in our last milling project, he has some great ideas on how we can increase the efficiency and productivity of our wood milling projects. We are currently in the process of procuring and installing a variety of infrastructure at the Poplar Farm, which is the picture on the top there. That includes fencing, irrigation. Well, that's it so far. And then we're going to have street department. We're going to partner with them in getting some permanent roads established so that we are able to travel without doing damage to our fields. We are in the process as well, and will soon be putting trees in the ground in our first infrastructure included improvement reforestation bond project. And that's a planting in the South Hills Trail Corridor, which is Honeysuckle Trail. It's a connector from Wapakia Park. And it's currently a fairly barren wasteland. I'm saying that somewhat facetiously, but we are partnering with the district representative, Adam Coe, who was previously mentored, who's a certified arborist. He drew up a really nice planting plan. We're going to plant around some swales in the 100-year stormwater floodplain, and plant 27 trees to provide shade to the trail, as well as providing for infrastructure, meaning that we are going to incorporate our first irrigation improvements along with the project to ensure that the trees survive. As Marie indicated, we have a lot of grant funding to start moving on. So we're actively going to be recruiting for positions and looking to get a template for the new website. We have a bid opening this Friday for a CIP improvement, which will greatly improve our efficiency. We're hoping to get a successful purchase of a grapple truck. We'll know by Friday afternoon when and if we are going to be able to pull that from this advertisement. And we're also looking to create and enhance our, well, it's actually a complete redoing of our cost share program. We're now doing what we're calling the Urban Forest Enhancement Sponsorship Program, which is effectively the same thing as a cost share program with a little bit higher of a cost for sponsoring. But this will allow individuals who may not be in an area for priority planting to move themselves up on the planting list, but also part of the sponsorship funding that they provide to get bumped up on the planting list will be used to help get more trees established in underserved areas. So what challenges are we going to face when we're trying to do all this stuff? Reduction of CSR backlog, and CSRs again are those 500 service requests that we have sitting and we're chipping away at. But my staff's got a lot of different roles throughout the city, and taking a look at rough numbers after this winter, I can safely say that nearly 50% of my staff's time in fiscal year 22 was done doing those secondary program tasks and not addressing that CSR backlog. So that is going to be a challenge. We're going to have to be very creative in trying to allocate our labor and consider alternate labor structures going forward to try and improve the amount of time we're spending doing actual tree work. And as great as grants are, they are a soft source of funding. They're time limited, and they often will allow for projects to become established, but they don't have anything for perpetual maintenance. So again, it's spreading thin of staff through creation of program enhancements. And then, as Marie said, she did 600 plus C of O's, certificate of occupancy inspections last year. I think she's expecting to do 2 to 3 times that amount this year. The city continues to annex more area. Yeah, see, 2 to 3 times that this year. The city continues to annex more area, which inherently comes along with more trees and more need for planting. So again, trying to figure out creatively how we are going to tackle this with the resources we have and prospectively address what resources we will need going forward. So with that, I think I'm going to be able to turn it over to Jeff for some conservation lands program highlights. Thank you guys for having me. Very nice to meet those of you that I have not met.
Thanks, Ben. Being cognizant of time, I'm going to breeze through this. As Morgan mentioned, we have an annual report. So this has already been presented to CLAC. It has been finalized, but it has not yet been published on the website. So once we have it published on the website, I will make sure that it's shared with park board members and the public. So yeah, we're going to run through a very quick presentation on some updates for 2021 Conservation Lands Program. Starting off with program and system growth, as Morgan mentioned, we are now whole in terms of staffing. And that's just a portion of the continued implementation of the Conservation Stewardship Mill Levy. So in 2021, we hired 4 new permanent positions. We actually also formed recreation, natural resource, and management and program support functional work teams, really defining roles within the program. We have expanded contracted services and materials budgets. That's really helped immensely with supplementing work, right, in addition to in-house staff. And then especially in the last, I'm going to say 6 to 8 months, we've really focused on increasing user and public education outreach and volunteerism. So looking at this is the conservation land system as it stands as of December 31st, 2021. We currently manage just shy of 5,000 acres, including, and I have 3 highlights shown here in yellow boxes in the map right. Marshall Mountain, which is a lease with Izzy Dog LLC. The Fort Missoula Natural Ponds. We did a site visit there with CLAC and OSAC back in September of last year. And then the recently opened Mount Dean Stone Preserve that we opened to the public last year. I'm not going to go through the individual sort of distributions here. We still have many more park preserves, which are the large red categories. We do interestingly have a couple of properties, Marshall Mountain and Fort Ponds, which are still sort of undetermined in their parkland category. So that will have to happen through the master planning process for both those sites. And I just want to really quickly touch on this functional work team development. This is allowing for more specialization within the program, which leads to a higher quality of work and ultimately more work accomplished. And I just want to remind everybody why, these 3 programs and what they're doing, the roles they're serving. So the Recreation Resource Management Functional Work Team is really, users are experiencing conservation lands primarily through outdoor recreational opportunities. The natural resource management component is protecting what makes conservation lands special. And then the program support component is really essential to improving our management over time and educating and engaging residents. A few major accomplishments. And again, I'm going to run through this. This is kind of by category. I will share the annual report, which goes into all of these in much more detail. We had a huge level of effort in integrated vegetation management. Again, I'm not going to go through all these statistics. They're in the report, but really focusing on controlling invasive species, especially in protecting our areas that are still relatively intact throughout the system. We really also focused on native species restoration. Some big highlights here, continuing work at the Rattlesnake Dam Restoration Project, reseeding the North Hills fire that occurred last year. Again, if you've been down on John Toole Prairie, Parks Board considered the trail widening project there. We went in and restored the stream bank afterwards and fenced the area to protect it from the public. Many other projects ongoing, including the removal of non-native golden willows at Bancroft Ponds. We will be planting that area in the next 2 weeks with volunteers from the local schools. Forestry management. Last year, we treated approximately 82 acres on Mount Jumbo and Marshall Canyon. A lot of goals and efforts here, use of 2 private contractors, the MCC crew, and the conservation land staff. And just for reference, this is a non-commercial timber operation. Our overall cost of this project, which included a $33,000 DNRC Forest Health Grant, is approximately $75,000. So it's very expensive if we're not pulling the timber off the lands and selling it, but also understanding that we are making sure that we're taking care of the land. A commercial timber operation has many more impacts by extracting that timber, creation of logging roads, et cetera, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that we're restoring the forest health while minimizing impacts as well. A lot of recreation management projects last year. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these. Some highlights include really working throughout the conservation land system, including in the South Hills, resurfacing the Peary Park Trail, managing Marshall Mountain, and developing, these are the photos you see at the bottom here, developing a comprehensive sign package, developing a new welcome sign package for all of our trailheads, and then again, additional trail work throughout the system. So it's been really good, and we have a lot more work and big projects planned for this year. We also had some cultural resource management projects. And again, not that many people think about this when they think about the conservation land system. We have been working with the caretakers at the Moon Randolph Homestead, general building upkeep and vegetation maintenance. We also worked with them to develop a fire prevention response and education plan, which is really timely considering the North Hills fire last year. Engaging with the Salish Cultural Committee, and then including a welcome message in 5 languages on our welcome sign. Our research and monitoring program continues to move forward. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but some highlights including recreational use monitoring, long-term baseline plot monitoring, working a lot in partnership with the Native Plant Society on looking at Missoula phlox populations on 2 city properties, data collection in the rattlesnake wilderness, and then looking at elk population monitoring around the valley. We also have a number of ongoing base research projects, and these are looking at impacts of spotted knapweed, looking at how long we need to exclose deer from our restoration plantings, the effect of herbicide on ventonata, as well as Missoula phlox outplanting trials. I did want to highlight this. Last year, we had 154 individual volunteers contributing 634 hours of volunteer labor, and this really translates to $12,500 in cost savings for the program. I'm really looking forward to expanding this and other public engagement opportunities, as well as partnerships. The second point here is Missoula phlox efforts with the Native Plant Society, a lot of others, and expanding that level of public engagement this coming year and then beyond. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these. We have a lot of goals here, including broadly increasing our maintenance capacity, right? So we had staff that came on for the first time last year. They were getting to know the system and the resources, and allowing them to hit the ground running this spring. One thing I do want to highlight, there has been talk about, our sort of natural resource management maintenance needs. We actually just hired, and they started yesterday, a 4-person native species restoration crew to really help our permanent staff with all aspects of native species restoration, from the plant propagation, they've been working in the greenhouse the last 2 days, to invasive species control, to then outplanting and maintenance of those projects as well. So really targeting the use of our seasonal staff funds to get a lot more work done. I mentioned Bancroft Ponds, continuation of the Rattlesnake Dam restoration project. We have a lot of rec projects coming this year. One is ongoing right now that Parks Board considered last month. So the crew broke ground on the Jumbo Saddle Trails plan about a week and a half ago. They're actively building trail today. We have 4 volunteer trail work opportunities in the next 3 weeks. The Bluebird Preserve, which you will see a draft management plan from us next month. Continuation of implementation of the Rattlesnake Dam project, and then also the Clark Fork Island Natural Preserve. We have ongoing maintenance and improvement of all of our existing trails, including a biannual walkthrough to make sure we don't have any emerging maintenance needs. And then deployment of, I mentioned all of those new signs that have been developed over the last year. We're slowly rolling those out throughout the system. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on their program support services. And again, this is really what helps us plan for then implementation in the field. We have all of those ongoing monitoring and research projects that I mentioned. We did hire a seasonal research assistant to work with Graham this year. We have a lot of collaborative projects and partnerships, working to continue those. And then lastly, I think this is something I'm personally really excited about. It's long needed to finalize and publish an updated trail map, both dynamically online, web-based at first, and then an updated printed trail map for the conservation land system and the surrounding areas, including our sort of urban commuter trails and adjacent public lands trails. So I just wanted to touch on the last couple of things. I really like Ben's last slide, challenges we will face going forward. And so a few of those include continuing to grow our maintenance capacity while also expanding education and outreach efforts. So those two things are both needed at the same time. And if we just focused on one or the other, we really wouldn't be getting that much done. So making sure we're expanding all of our capacity at the same time. Improving maintenance of our existing projects and resources throughout the system. We're really good at building new things. We're not the greatest at maintaining our existing resources. And so making sure we're focusing on that as well. Providing adequate program and administrative support for all of our new projects and partnerships. I do tend to find that I'm the bottleneck and my time is limited. And so making sure that we have sort of structure in place where we can initiate and implement all of those projects in an efficient manner. And then also improving community stewardship and support for city conservation lands and surrounding public lands. Been talking about this immensely in CLAC this year. And we are looking forward to testing a pilot trail ambassador program on a very small scale this coming summer, which is really looking at increasing user education and instilling a sense of stewardship in our conservation lands. And that is all the slides that we have.
Thank you all very much for that report. Do we have any questions from members of the board for any of the presenters? I have a quick question. I know that we have some protocols in place for when we're removing trees near a neighborhood to notify those in the surrounding area of the work about to be deployed. Ben, do we have anything similar when we're doing planting, just to let the neighbors know of activity and what will be happening in the area around their homes or their local parks?
Donna, I don't know if you want to jump in on this at all. When we were discussing the honeysuckle trail improvement, Donna said, "Where are we at in outreach?" And I was like, I haven't really been brought up to speed on, what the appropriate amount of outreach would be to do with a project of similar scale to the one that we're proposing. I guess Morgan's going to elaborate a little bit, but we have talked about doing meeting with the neighborhood group, doing a PSA. You can go ahead and elaborate, Morgan.
Yeah, and feel free to chime in, Maria or Karen. I mean, we obviously the Urban Forestry program does a significant amount of outreach to our neighborhoods. And oftentimes when we're planting trees, in a boulevard adjacent to a house, I mean, we're having direct repeated communications with those individual affected landowners. One thing that we just did with the Waterworks Hill Trail project is come up with an actual project template that can be used on all of our open space bond projects. And so that was just developed through our communication staff, Becky Goodrich, and is getting rolled out on the Waterworks Hill Trail project, which will be closing in a few days and starting. And so we are looking at adapting that to these other areas where we will be using open space bonds to move forward restoration, reforestation goals, to let people know how their money is being spent. I think, and Marie, and I'm going to shut up here, but you've definitely done a great job of also providing some of that on-site signage when you have planting events and volunteers. But, we still, I think, as been mentioned, are gelling around our formal communication package. We haven't really settled on this is the way we do it every time yet. Did you have something to add there, Marie?
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. One of the things that we are working on too, part of that SEFRA grant, is that seasonal person, and that is a big part of what they're going to be doing, is a lot of that education outreach and social media blast to make sure that people are getting the word that, not only are there new trees coming, but, all these other projects and how it's all interconnected.
Just to add on, and I think this is something that I've seen over the last few years, as we've implemented program specialist positions within operation, the amount of work that we're capable of doing as far as outreach by having the Maries and the Clancys. I mean, we are, now that we've had several years under our belt and we're fully running, I mean, this position has just turned out to be absolutely critical in my mind of providing that higher level of outreach on these projects. And we find when we do take that investment, not surprisingly, we spend a lot less time on the back end fielding calls and I hesitate to say complaints, but inquiries about what we're doing. And so it's certainly paying dividends and is a position, quite honestly, I feel like we need more of throughout the department.
Thank you, Morgan. Yeah, I know, Margie, with your background and experience, you probably have dealt with some of this before and outreach to the public. So I'm glad to see the city is doing more. Do we have any other comments or questions from the board?
I have a question for Ben. You said you had about 500 customer service requests. Is that fairly normal for a year? And what are most of those requests about or for?
That is a comprehensive backlog of everything that has not been addressed since we purchased our operating software that we are currently managing our service requests in. I think it dates back to, I got the printout right here, 2014. And a lot of those probably have been addressed and then weren't closed out. So I'm in the process of going through all of them. The process for how we address service requests is really based on inherent risk involved in the situation. So we have 3 levels of priority for service requests that involve pruning or removal. Technically 4, 1 would be emergent, high and medium and low. Unfortunately, a lot of those lower priority requests continue to get pushed out because there is a reduced or no imminent threat to persons or property. So as we continue to go and do inspections, when we do find a service request of a higher priority, because it is a higher level of risk to the city, it takes precedent and is handled first. So I'm thinking that is where the majority of these older requests are. Like I said, I'm just kind of in the process of going through them and analyzing where and how my staff spends their time, because I am fairly new, having been gone from the city for 10 years. So very interesting. But yes, the majority of the older ones are a simple pruning request, standard dead wood, something small, nothing inherently posing threat to persons or property. So like I said, several requests that I did in the last couple of days would take precedent over 15 of these requests that are several years old.
And, you know, I think one of the challenges within the urban forestry program, it certainly receives the highest volume of customer service requests of any other program. And what we're finding is that, you know, if you get a service request, even if it's a low priority, a limb that could stay there for several years, you still have to go out and assess it. You still have to meet with the homeowner. And what we are finding is that is the bulk of what our arborists do now. And so we are very much in a reactive mode as far as maintenance of our urban forest. And we are working on strategies to move towards that proactive management, because that's really how we're going to get ahead. And as our forest ages and we have more extreme weather events, we typically see more increase in these customer service requests.
Thanks, Morgan. Any other questions? Any comments from members of the public?
There's no comment.
Okay. Erin, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
I did have a quick question. And this is well, first also a comment. Thanks so much for all your work, everyone. I love seeing our urban forests grow here in Missoula, and I know that's largely a big effort on your part. And my question is surrounding our push towards native trees here in Missoula as well, and whether or not we have a program in place to either work with nursery partners or even residents, and what education around that looks like. I'm sure, Karen, you probably have a huge handle on that as well, but I'm just wondering if there is some sort of supplementary program that kind of assists with that.
Yeah, Marie, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, actually, that's a huge part of what we're doing with the ball and burlap nursery that we're installing as part of the SEFRA grant. All of those tree species that we've already selected, and actually I think we're picking up the order today, they're all native species, and the seed sources are from here in Montana. One of the other portions of that is we're trying to make sure that the priority for those plantings are going in for the open space bond. They're also going into our Invest Health neighborhoods, which are our #1 priority for plantings. And then also as part of the form-based code out in the Swatip-Kane area out by the airport, the first plant palette that has been developed out there is all native species strong. So it's all from trees, forbs, grasses, all of it. It's all native plants first, and then introduced species second, depending on availability. And then the nursery component of that is we have been reaching out to all of our local nurseries and trying to push all of the native plantings, and specifically climate resilient plantings, because those species tend to be the most resilient. We've also been working with our wholesalers, because they're not here in the Missoula Valley, they're in Kalispell and in Idaho. And we've reminded them that not only is the city of Missoula one of the large purchasers of wholesale products, but our nurseries here locally that will be providing trees to landscapers who have to plant trees that are approved by our department. They really should be selling trees that work here in our climate and are climate resilient. So it's kind of a multi-stage process trying to make sure that that happens.
And unfortunately, a lot of these wholesalers can't provide our needs. They just can't get us enough trees. And that's where that ball and burlap tree nursery is really obviously we got to get the trees big enough, but in 3 to 5 years, we're going to have the ability to just have our own orders that we're producing.
Thank you all. Great questions and great information. We're going to move on now. We've got about 20 minutes left, and really want to make sure we can get to the director's report this time. Donna always gets switched to the last. So I'd like to get item 3.2, the aquatics revenue and attendance update from Shirley.
Shirley, you're
Shirley, you're
muted.
muted. Looks like we might be having some problems with Shirley being able to unmute herself. There we go.
Okay. So can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. So thanks. So in February, I brought the Recreation Division report and presented some inaccurate numbers in the graph that depicted the aquatics attendance. So the report, the graph that we had in the division report didn't capture attendance at currents, which created the anomaly in the graph. So these are the revised numbers, and you can see that we're rebounding from the pandemic. Summer of 21, we were still operating under the COVID protocols, which reflects the decrease in our general admission numbers. It was helpful in the rental area that MAC had rented currents for their fall through spring practice. And they also extended their practice at the 50 meter out at Splash through September. We continue to see decrease in our swim lesson numbers just because of lack of instructors. That's been an ongoing challenge for us. And overall, being able to increase the attendance during the rec swim last year as Splash was extremely helpful, along with really warm weather in July. So I just wanted to come back and update that graph and give you the correct numbers.
Thank you, Shirley. I was just trying to add up the difference between 2019 and 2021. And are your projections that 2022, we should be back on track and, for lack of a better word, not be in the red?
John, I'm hoping so. If we can find staff, I can say that we'll give it the old college try. Staffing is extremely challenging, and I'm hoping that we'll have the same opening hours as we have in the past, but at this point, we're evaluating our situation with staffing.
Thanks. And Donna, are there any budget implications on these shortfalls? Looks like we're close to around almost 100,000 difference between 19 and 21. Is that
There
gonna
are.
impact your budgeting?
One of the things that through the various funds, particularly ARPA in the older cares, is recovering revenues lost that were specifically related to the pandemic. So we will get some help there. Looking back, that those funds aren't recognized yet. And I just echo for everybody, there's one primary thing that changes the picture of our budget for Splash, Montana, and that's weather. We need warm weather without smoke and without frequent thunderstorms at the peak of the day. The second thing that we are now experiencing that could be as difficult as the pandemic is employees are not available, and we are in competition with other employers who can be a bit more responsive to the market. And it's challenging for us to pay all of our positions at a rate that they might be that we're competing with, because it impacts every other employee that's also in our chain of employees. And we're unable to move the entire city to align with the current employment market for all of the tourism, recreation, and food service industries. It's pretty difficult.
Thank you, Donna. Any questions for Shirley or Donna from other members of the board? Any questions from the general public?
There's no questions.
Thank you. We'll move on now to item 3.3, the subcommittee reports. I know Daniel's not here. I'll try to keep mine real quick. The CLAC meeting this month on April the 4th was a lot. There were a lot of material that were shared there and some good discussions. There were 4 main points that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. The CLAC committee had a pretty robust discussion on the jumbo saddle and the park board vote and discussion. They wanted to make sure that it aligned with what CLAC had brought forward. We also had an action item, which was approving the draft plan for the Bluebird property coming up. We addressed things like trash, trail routes to elsewhere, equestrian use, and the Republic waste concerns. So that was a really thoughtful discussion. The third area was the annual review of the Greeno Park 13 points and where the city stands with aligning with those 13 points. So again, another great discussion. I'm happy to share information on that if people are interested. And then the last action item was to look at the draft plan for the pilot program being introduced for trail ambassadors, which is really exciting. And I know Jeff has been working a lot on that trail ambassador program, just from involvement from other groups like Friends of Missoula Parks. We're also quite interested in that program as well. And I know there are other groups that are interested in participating as the program grows. So really exciting things in terms of trail education for user etiquette, things like that, and where a trail ambassador might be able to help mitigate user conflicts, things of that nature. So great discussion this month at CLAC. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Hey, John, this is Wendy. I have a question about the first item you had, which was the jumbo saddle. Is there anything about the conversation you can tell us? Did they feel like we had followed or addressed their concerns, or is there anything you can give us more info about there?
Sure. Yeah, and Jeff could probably chime in here as well. But I think that we followed their directives. There was some just comments within the members to make sure that they all had the opportunity to express themselves, had the right information, and made the right recommendations. And I think those were pretty well resolved. Some of those discussions were really around just how does CLAC work and how do comments come into play and how do we vote on things of that nature. I don't think there were any concerns about whether or not the park board did the right thing by approving the recommendations from CLAC.
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure. Jeff, would you say that was an adequate description?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I think again, when they're making recommendations, they want to know how those recommendations are being received, right? And or considered. And so, they specifically asked me if anything had been changed, what the decision was, and then John, you were able to share that because you chaired the last Parks Board meeting as well. So yeah.
Yeah, there was a question, Wendy, about the compliance issue and cameras and how we dealt with that. And so again, I think it was all well intended. All right, Donna, we left you 9 whole minutes for a director's report.
Thank you. I want to touch on some changes in the department, and Nathan McLeod is our senior landscape architect, replacing Neil Miner as Parks and Trails Design and Development Manager. So Nathan now leads a team of landscape architects, including 2 of our newest, Lucy Rumler, who is a new member of our team, and Ezra Williams. Lucy comes from a LA firm. She's been living here for a while and was working on the East Coast virtually, and now is full-time with us. Her particular expertise is around stormwater, hydro systems. So I think really fantastic for us, particularly with the projects we have coming up. She will also, along with Ezra Williams, provide 1 full FTE of landscape architect time to reviews of development and permits for CPDI. And then Ezra just joined us this week, And he is the landscape architect when he was working with CTA, one of our local engineering firms. Actually has had part in, I think, about 14 new playgrounds and a handful of park improvements, including Silver Park. And so he comes to us with quite a bit of experience. It's a great 3-person team. And then Garrick Swanson has been with us as a temporary, and I certainly hope to be able to add him soon because he has been providing the services related to all of our park asset management infrastructure. So he's doing the neighborhood sport courts, the tennis courts, the restrooms, working with Link and David and our team on internal related capital and cyclical improvements. And we are able to keep, believe it or not, all 4 more than busy. I could probably use a few more of that particular expertise. So those are some changes. Also, TJ Machado is on his last week with Parks and Recreation. He was our Developed Parks and Trails superintendent. And Lincoln Lake is very qualified and has graciously agreed to step in as our interim superintendent of Developed Parks and Trails. Link came to us as manager following becoming famous here at the department with the installation of the irrigation system at Fort Missoula, quite honestly, among many other projects. And he has definitely shown his skills at understanding management of developed parks, scheduling, coordination, communications. And so we welcome Link to this role. And so still need another full-time in park maintenance in Morgan and Jeff's area. We are losing our incredible plant specialist in the nursery. She's moving on to a really awesome opportunity with the extension office and the over at the butterfly gardens at the fairgrounds. So we'll still get to collaborate, cooperate, and learn from her. But that's another position we're looking at filling. We've had some move-abouts. Alex Morrow, who has been a superstar in our business functional work team, is now moving over to our recreation functional work team, and he will be assisting under Brian at Fort Missoula and with special events and sports facilities. And then just recently, we've had Marcus Milo and Madison, I'm going to lose the last name right now, join in, thank you, in BFT, business functional work team. Again, 2 superstars that have been working internally with the department for some time now and finally have achieved that status. So a lot of good stuff going on. I think our greatest worry at this time is honestly having enough employees to run all of the programs. To give you an example, we filled in just over an hour on Sunday, April 3rd. We hit a new, in fact, we completely demolished our old record of registrations. We're all quite pleased that the phones and the computers and the software stood up to the registration, and we brought in somewhere around $375,000 in revenue, real round numbers, registered about 3,400 plus individuals in summer program camps. It doesn't even include aquatics or other instructional lessons yet, or a lot of the sports. And we have almost 2,500 individuals on the waiting list. That I think demonstrates the quality of the programs that the department has offered. It also, I think, demonstrates the demand for childcare, because these camps do run 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you can register for a week at a time, and they last through the summer. We're one of the few camps that goes all the way to the end of summer, and I know that camp was completely overwhelmed. It also shares our challenges with capacity from a staffing, transportation, but also land access. We've maxed out all of our permits on state and federal lands. And so it's been one of the things that I've been most passionate about related to Marshall Mountain is being able to help expand program services for youth. Important bit of information for all of you, because I've received this question in other arenas, is how does this work in the world of equity? Because we all know what it takes to be online at 0 and 1/100th second before registration time. And we had an equal proportionate number of our scholarship families get into programs as did full pay families. We took particular care and attention to making sure that all of our families who had interest had equal access. So we're still faced with the challenge of delivery of sufficient services. More challenging in the world of even more challenging are all of our areas of customer service, first line of service, point of sale, concessions, lifeguarding. In those areas, we can site supervisors for sports. We tend to compete even more directly with our competitors across the community. And so again, greatest concern is how many and how many hours we're going to be able to facilitate the rest of our program services. We're working really hard at recruitment. We've been trying to be creative, reaching out to channels we have not yet reached out to, being very market conscious about what we're trying to do. Our messaging is very much about we do make a difference here. Families rely heavily on us, and we know from the pandemic how important the services have been for our community. So it's huge, and as you can imagine, it's a whole interaction. Our frontline customer service staff under Danielle's leadership, we're all here Sunday morning, rightfully so, celebrating. We had a huge number of employees on staff helping customers out, troubleshooting. Certainly, we received some complaints about people who didn't get into camps, but just the fact that the whole system didn't fail with that kind of load over a few minutes was amazing to me. The other thing, and then I'm out of time, we do have strategic planning coming up with Park Board on May 12th. Please keep that on your schedule. The only thing that would change that is the mayor is trying to get in 5 interviews because we do have a number of openings on Park Board. And if for some reason we can't get those filled, and our new members to the strategic planning, we're going to come back to you and change that date because we have such a significant change in leadership at the Park Board level. And our Park Board has always been known as one of the model advisory boards that advises the department, the mayor, and the council on management of public infrastructure and all sorts of things related to that. And so that would be the only reason we delay. Right now we're scheduled for 11:30 to 7:30. We'll be in the main floor or the upper floor of First Interstate Bank. So you'll get to look out the window and see everything we manage from one place, and we will provide the meals. Ginny Tribe will be our facilitator. We will gather data for you, and we will be focused around City Council and the mayor's 6 strategic goals. And 2 of those strategic priorities include the development of lens through which all others work by the city will be viewed. In those 2 lenses, if you will, think of a pair of glasses and a framework with 2 lenses. One is JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. The other is Climate, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And there's obviously multiple areas where those come together so that we have good focus. And so that's been my metaphor about what those lenses do. And we have a significant number of park and recreation employees on both of those strategic implementation work teams within the city.
Thank you, Donna. We always seem to kind of run out of time with you. And I know that I personally enjoy the presentations from department heads and things of that nature, but I'm wondering, because the budget's coming up and we didn't even get to talk about goals and things like that, that maybe at the next meeting, rather than having a department head do a presentation, maybe we move you so that you have adequate time and the board has adequate time to interact and ask questions.
Sure. We'll take a look at who's presenting, and Cassie and I and the rest of the team will work on sort of preliminary information for strategic planning. And that'll get us into budget and goals and all of that stuff.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, we are at time. If anybody has any closing questions they'd like to ask of Donna or anybody else? Hearing none, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Margie. Is there a second?
This is Wendy with the.
Thanks, Wendy. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.